not going to see the end, though. It's already late.
That's why it's today.
It's already 10 minutes late, so you're probably not going to see the end. It'll be all changed by then. He's going in. He's presenting very well. I just switched them up on my panel as well. Now you have what panel about? I'm doing two panels. One about mental health and depression. And the other one's sustainability and climate change.
So they're doing environmental stuff.
I'm actually taking
Why don't you leave back a bit? Sit back there then if
see
you
how
can't
it is.
see.
I really like that.
These guys
I like going to it gives me time to play there, to play games.
Sorry? Yeah, they'll be moving around. So you don't see them.
You guys are blocking all these. You can't see anything.
Yeah, because his was like up here, wasn't it, as well? There's always a blender question.
Oh, I'm sure.
I've heard the answer. The last one I see is
It's going to solve everything. Unreal is going to solve world peace. I will say that Unreal will solve world peace, Russia, everything.
It was only that easy.
Solves everything. It has everything. They're going to take some pictures now.
Yeah. So we've got like a couple of. There's someone who's kind of the one who took a photo of you earlier is kind of working on our social and and we got. Okay, welcome everybody to your last Industry Week event. I'm guessing it's the last one. Has anyone booked onto anything this evening? No? Probably because I've put on 8 compulsory talks or something for them this week. So they've been very, very, very busy. So welcome to your session with Hugo and Son. They're going to talk to you about the behind the scenes on how Rebellion Film Studios created a full CG cinematic for the game Sniper Elite 5. They're going to discuss the trailer's concept and creative vision, showcase the mocap shoot and stunt performance, and go over the animation, modelling, lighting, rendering, compositing, USD pipeline, and grading. And they're going to show you an epic trailer. You guys know this already, but if there's a fire alarm, you need to go through out the main way you came in and onto Brook Street. And remember, if you take any pictures, to hashtag IW22, Industry Week 22, and you might win a £50 voucher. So. Yeah, it's a really good prize. I might do my own VFX prize. Anyway, so that's it, guys. So let's give these guys a huge, warm welcome and enjoy your last talk. I'll go this way.
Okay, so thank you so much for being here, and especially it's a big pleasure because it's in person, this festival, because I've been like for 2 years locked in my house.
Yeah, can't remember last time.
I know. So I'm gonna remove this meme collection that I have here, but I have one last meme that I would like to share with you, and I would like to dedicate it to all of you. Maybe some of you haven't experienced this yet because you're not working yet, but I can assure you, you will experience this one day.
What do you want? What do you want?
It's not that simple.
What do you want? What do you want?
I have to go.
What do you want?
Yeah, so I'm sure you don't know yet, but this was going to be your life for many years to come. Anyway, I don't want to be that bleak, but so thank you so much for having us here. My name is Hugo, Hugo Guerra, and I am a director and visual effects supervisor. I've been working for about 20 years, maybe 21 years. I don't know, I lost count, I'm a bit old. And I've been working in a lot of different places. I've worked a lot of times at the BBC for on-set supervision. Worked for a while at Nexus for a couple of years, Jellyfish. At the mill, I was there for many years. I was the head of composting at the mill, nuke composting. Was there for 5 years. And then I was working about 4 years at Fire Smoke, where I was a director and doing cinematics. Worked a bit with Sony, PlayStation, and Sony Pictures on set for a project that was canceled, unfortunately. And then lately, and this is what we're talking about today, I directed a trailer for Rebellion Studios. But my life is mainly sets and green screen shoots and footage and filming and supervision and filming things and scratching my head a lot and trying to understand what the hell are we gonna do. And a lot of times you see me doing stupid things like this, like just carrying weird stuff on set and spheres and balls and getting asked by the crew, who is that guy with the spheres? Who's that guy? What is he doing with those balls? So I've been working for the visual effects industry. I've been working for about 10 years, and then I switched to the games industry. And that's what I've been doing for the last about 10 years. And I did trailers and cinematics for all kind of like these games. And of course, the game we're going to present today, which is Sniper Elite 5. Always been like, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have later on about the work that I did on these other games, either on trailers or on cinematics or in-game cinematics or things like that. But that's enough for me. I'm going to pass it over to my friend here.
Thank you, Hugo. Hi, my name is Hisam. I'm head of VFX at Rebellion Film Studios. I'm also the VFX supervisor on this project. So I started my career about 15 years ago as a game developer. I was actually working in Derby, which is really close to here. A company called Eurocom is where my first job was. I started as a FX artist doing effects and fires, smokes, and rains and things like that. And these are the games that I worked in the last 10 years, if you like. Stepped into visual effects industries about 5 years ago, and have worked lucky enough to work on some of the biggest names that you probably have watched on the big cinemas, including Lion King, Maleficent, and recently The Mandalorians. About 2 years ago, I went back to. Oh, you want to do the trophy first? Go. Well, I would probably. The order is a bit. I mean, I was just gonna. Yeah.
Go for it.
Should we do the Sophie first? We'll do it later? Yeah, Should I talk about Rebellion a little bit? Okay, cool. All right. So 2 years ago, I established VFX divisions at Rebellion Film Studios. Rebellions are originally a game developers, and the film studio is an expansion on top of what the game division has done. Rebellion owns about 75% of the British comics books. You probably heard things like Judge Dredd and Rogue Troopers, a big 2000 AD franchise. That's what we own. So the team has been running for 2 years, and this is the facility that you're seeing. Some amazing spaces here where we're doing a lot of motion captures, but also we have one main stage that we do filming sets and things like that. This is the future plan for the studios, which we are very ambitious about expansion of our studios, and that's future will look like. Our services including virtual productions, game trailer cinematics, as well as the visual effects for films and TV. I'm going to play our virtual production showreel, which concludes the last 2 years of the amazing work that the team has been produced. And all of the works is completely done in Unreal Engine. All right, I'm happy to answer any questions later. And now I think we should do the selfie, yes?
Yeah, you are. So, often every time I do these presentations, I always take a 360 photo with everyone. And if anyone doesn't want to be on the photo, they can, of course, leave. But I'm very happy if you would be kind enough to have a photo with me. I'm going to just be there in the middle and take the photo. Well, I'm just going to jump. Yeah, I'll just jump. It's fine. So the trick here is this photo will eventually be online. I guess I'm going to try to win that prize. That's what I'm going to try to do. So if you guys want to be on the photo, make sure you see the lens. If you see that the lens is being covered, that means you are being covered by someone, okay? You all ready? Time to smile. Everyone has to smile, and everyone has to be very happy. Come on, let's go for it. Okay, one for safety. Cool, thank you so much. Look for social media at some point.
That's it.
How are we gonna get up now? Oh, that's not gonna work for me. I'm too old and too fat for that. Okay,
we're gonna play the trailer now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is what we came here to talk about. It's the Sniper Elite trailer, which we did at Rebellion Game Studios. This trailer is done in full CG with the traditional visual effects pipeline. I was the director of this project, and then Sun was the visual effects supervisor. And of course, we had an enormous team at Rebellion also that couldn't be here today, but of course, kudos to all of them. So let's just watch the trailer first, and then we're gonna talk about how it was developed.
The steel wheels of the Nazi war machine crush everything in their path. Fast, relentless, ruthless. They dominate and destroy, casting a vile shadow across mainland Europe. Now we must strike back, living, fighting, and killing in the shadows. Where most despair, when they step into the face of impossible odds, we shall smile and see an opportunity. We know the risks. If we do not take them, no one else will. We must be ready to make that sacrifice.
Okay. So, as I was saying on the beginning of this presentation, like obviously nothing gets done without a large team, and that's what happened here. This, of course, was an effort done by dozens of people, dozens of very talented artists at Rebellion, and a lot of people at Rebellion Studios, and also Rebellion, the games division as well. And this is, again, you know, we're going to talk a lot about this during the talk, not only teamwork, but also how a production like this gets done. It's never really done by just one person. So I just wanted to make sure that is coming across. Now, one thing I want to ask, is it possible to lower the lights a bit? Because no one is going to see anything on the screen. Just a bit, please. A bit more? So we can see that?
Better.
More? More?
Better.
Okay, I'm going to be forced to have that light. Okay, that's fine. Okay, can you guys see better now? Yeah? So I wanted to start this presentation by, of course, how always these projects start. As a director, of course, I had to provide references. I was not alone on this. Of course, our lighting TD and our lighting head and our VFX supervisor, all of us chipped in to kind of get a reference and a look in what we wanted to achieve with this trailer. One thing I wanted to emphasize is that there's no real possibility for you to create anything from scratch. And it always reminds me of this sentence from Picasso, which probably it's not Picasso. No one really knows if it's his or not. That's why I wrote the maybe there. It's probably not from him. But one of the most important things that you come across from this is that, as he usually said, good artists copy, great artists steal. I don't completely agree with that, but I understand why he said it back then in the 1930s. But I kind of believe more that good artists copy and great artists capture an essence of something. You know, we kind of heard a bit about that this morning from Victor Perez here as well, about the essence of things. And of course, I'm not going to bother you with the actual definition of an essence, but for me, it's really important to actually think about, don't just copy, capture its essence. Just like this example here, where you can see from Roy Lichtenstein, and actually like a comic book strip that looks exactly like the work he's done, but it's not exactly like the work that he's done. The reason I'm showing you this is because, as always, for a trailer like this, we try to capture the essence of things. This trailer was quite difficult because we had to film, we had to fake all this lighting, of course, because it's a CG trailer, but we wanted a very specific time of the day, a time of the day which is really difficult to capture. Because if anything, when I look at trailers and when I look at cinematics, I always think that they are a bit overlit. And the objective this time was not to overlight things, was to actually have less light, to work with shadows, to work with silhouettes, to work with that magic hour that usually exists between the early morning, between 6 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock in the morning. That was kind of the objective. And as you can see on these images here, I put them side by side. Can you see the images? Yeah? Okay, because I can't see anything. That's why I'm completely blind by those lights. Sorry. This is not really like easy to look at.
The light is directly on you, I think.
Yes.
That's
oh,
why.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Look at that. That's awesome. Thank you. So, as you can see here, we try to capture the essence of an early morning. It always starts with photography. We gathered as many references as we could, and we kind of like established the look and the language of the trailer by using photography as the base for what we want to do. Because, like always, photography is always the base for all these things, both CG, compositing, any of the things that we do in visual effects, even setting up a game or even setting up a scene, even in Unreal, it would be the same thing. We have to always kind of get inspired and try to get the essence of what reality shows us. And that's what we did when we gathered all these scenes. And that's why you see that our images kind of are trying to look real, but they're kind of a stylized version of the essence of what it is to look at an early morning beach at 6 o'clock in the morning or at 7 o'clock in the morning. And we kept carrying on, and of course, obviously, like I just mentioned on that quote that we steal and copy all the time, there's always, of course, references for other films and more obscure references of things.
The game kind of travels from the early morning and then, of course, to the mid-afternoon where we have the sun hitting. And again, taking quotes, taking inspiration from how the sun hits materials and how the sun blooms and how it glows certain objects of the image. Kind of getting into this kind of imagery. I'm going to show you later on during this presentation how close we got from the concept art all the way to the final image, and we actually got quite close. But these are just more examples of some of the imagery that we were looking at to try to develop the language for this trailer. And the language had to be created really early on so that we didn't have to constantly change it a bit later as well. So, and of course, that scene where he gets revealed, where Carl gets revealed, was also pivotal for the story, for us to reveal him for the first time and walking through the shadows when we first see him through the lights. We also had quite a lot of influence from macro photography. For example, this shot here, which is from 7. It's a beautiful shot, shot with a very extreme lens. And we kind of had a couple of shots that were very, very inspired and tried to capture the essence of that kind of shot, especially the shot with the rifle eye, and of course the macro photo of the Nazi officer trying to kill Carl as well. The whole idea of this entire trailer was to try to be as grounded as we could. We tried to use cameras that had weight on them. We tried to use static cameras as well. We didn't move the camera much, and the reason for that is because I always truly believe that the camera needs to be showing you something. You're trying to tell the story, you're trying to tell the shot of what's happening. The camera doesn't need to move much. What needs to move is the objects and the things that are being photographed need to be moving. So we took a lot of inspiration from that. Once we passed over from that stage, we did something that I've always been doing on all the projects that I do, which is a paint over of everything. And this is, I would really recommend you all to do this process with your work, because this is one of the most organic and most creative and artistic parts of your project. This is the moment where you can invent whatever you want. You bring in a frame with, of course, some constraints. Of course, we had a client, and obviously we had to respect like the story that we were trying to tell, and we were trying to respect what the game was supposed to show. But the paint over phase is really important, and I really would advise you all to do that. To basically pick up frames from your CG package, whatever CG package it is, can be Unreal, can be Blender, can be Maya, can be whatever you want, and always go to Photoshop and paint on top to try to discover what the colors are going to be, what are the contrast ratios of the images, what are you trying to achieve with the shadows, with the bright areas. Because when you're painting something on Photoshop, you're free. You don't have the restrictions of production. You don't have a part where, oh, maybe we can't render that, or maybe we can't do that shot. None of that is possible when you're just in Photoshop, just painting on top. So together with our amazing matte painter, our amazing art director, matte painter, Jack, we did all these paint overs. And I was really proud that because we got quite close to the final version. So for example, and this is always very untypical, you know, typically you watch concept art and it's always never very close to the end product. But we try to use the concept art as a guideline of what we wanted to achieve. And I feel like we achieved quite close. If you look at this, for example, this is the concept art on the top, and this is the final shot on the bottom. It's not the same, of course, because it can't be the same, but it's exactly what we were trying to achieve, and that's why it looks so close. And there's other examples of that as well. For example, on these shots with him walking through the tower as well. I have another example of that exact same thing, one of my favorite paint overs that we did. Obviously, we couldn't really be this dark because this is not 300. So sorry, it's not 300, it's not Sin City, this trailer. But we tried to achieve the essence and the image that we were trying to go with this art here. So of course, it's not as dark, but we got pretty close. And I think this goes on and on through the entire trailer. We try to follow a language that was all driven by paint overs. And never underestimate the power of just painting some frames. And in fact, a lot of times in my career, there was a lot of times where we continue doing that during production, where we did a paint over, tried to look at how the light would look, then it would go back to CG, they would adjust the lighting, and then it goes back to paint over, we would paint some more stuff, and then go back to CG again. Especially because when you're in Photoshop, you're much more free to try things, and you don't have the constraints of the slowdown that you normally have trying to achieve this inside a 3D package. And this doesn't need to be in Photoshop, it can be on any application you want. You know, it doesn't need to be in Photoshop, like I said. Here's another example of the same kind of thing. And it goes on, and I know I'm already dragging quite a lot. I'm just gonna like skip all of this. Once we were kind of like, just gonna stop there, which is probably the last example of how close we got to the paint overs. Once we were on this stage, we then took all the paint overs and all the keyframes and did an animatic. And this was crucial for our stage where we were gonna go into a set and to a mocap studio to actually film this entire thing with the stunt artist and with an actor. And so this is the first edit we have. I'm not gonna show you the sound because this is me doing the voiceover and I'm embarrassed of it. I'm not gonna do that, I'm a terrible actor. But this is kind of like a next stage of evolution of this trailer. Trying as best as I can to show you the several stages of how you get to point one to the end point of delivery. But, you know, I'm Portuguese, so forgive me, I always talk too much. So I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to pass it over to Sun.
Blah, 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 right. Got used to this, you know. Right, so I'm gonna talk about the production, actual production, and the technique that we used in Rebellion. Just to be clear, this trailer was not done by Unreal Engine. This was done through our USD pipeline, which primarily was done in Houdini. Okay, so I'm just gonna talk about that a little more. If you have any question about Unreal, ask me afterwards, obviously.
Before anyone asks, it was not done in Unreal, yes.
So I just want to make it clear because, you know, at the beginning you saw the Unreal showreel, but this is not done in Unreal, just be clear. So after the paint over stage that you saw that Hugo showed you earlier, we doing animation block out, which is that we call it pre-visualization. And that's like very rough animation. And then you take that with you on set to show it to the actors, and then so they know exactly what they need to perform. Really, really helpful stage. Then we're going through motion capture, and then after the motion capture, that's not the end of it. Usually after the motion capture, you will do a motion editing. And that was usually done by a motion builder software code, which then clean up the penetrations of the fingers and things like that. Then passes to the animation department. And then the animation department will make it super awesome. And that's usually how the animation stage was done. So I'm gonna show you some of the examples how it started, which is this version you saw here. This is hand-keyed animation. We call it animation blocking. This is pre-visualization, which you take on set. Okay, this last stage you saw before you go on set for the motion capture. So as you can see, the animation is very rough, but you get the idea of the motion, get the idea of the timing, you get the idea of the camera angle that you're gonna use. Very, very crucial. This guy is blind for some reason, I don't know why. But yeah, who cares about his blind? As long as, you know, you see the motion of it, and, you know, you see his funky eyes, very funny thing, but, you know. You see, but the key thing you see is very, very close to the final in terms of the timing of it, you know, and that's the whole point of it. Okay, so next, this is what happens on set. We have this superhero doing Assassin's Creed move, almost.
One thing that is really important to point out is that when you go on set, this is not the time to be creative. So this is already, everything has been sorted, okay? So obviously sometimes we get creative on set, you know, it's bad, but it happens. But you wanna make sure when you go to a mocap stage, you know, the clock is ticking and the money is ticking as well. So you kinda have to have a good animatic with everything sorted out, what lenses are gonna use, what blocking, how many seconds each shot is, so that you can really be quick and film everything. We did the entire mocap shoot in one day. So
Yeah.
it actually wasn't even a long day. It was actually a normal day, which was really nice. It was really effective. And props to AudioMotion, of course. AudioMotion was the studio that we used, and they were amazing and accommodating everything we had to do.
Yeah, and like we said, like all the props that you saw is actually the dimension come from the games as well. So the more closer you get, and the less cleanup you're gonna do. So it's very, very important to have that preparation and cleanup. The software you saw on the right bottom corner, that was Shogun, which is the software to do motion capture. The camera tracking system with Vicom that we're using. Want to talk about him a little bit? You love to talk about him, do you?
No, yeah, I just wanted to mention that our actor, our Carl on the trailer, is a really, really cool stunt artist called Mike Snow. Here's some of the stuff that he does. He's pretty extreme. If you want to check out his work, he's actually, I don't know if you guys see a program called Ninja Warrior. He's actually one of the finalists of Ninja Warrior in Australia. So he's a pretty extreme guy. Not that anything we did was that extreme. So I think this was a really easy shoot for him, because the stuff he's doing here is like, wow, this is pretty cool. I just wanted to give it a bit of shout out. It was really good. It was really nice to work with him on set. We had a lot of fun. And obviously, not only were we were tracking him with this really fancy tracking suit, but we were also using props as well on set, not just for the gun and for anything that they were touching, including the papers and everything, but also we had to like develop ramps. We had to develop little places where he could jump to that would be roughly on the same size and distance of the objects on the game. And that's where it really comes in handy that you can load up the game and kind of like test and actually have it all in the same proportions, you know, so that you can kind of really be clean. And so these are just some of the examples of what happened on set, of some of the most, you know, crucial parts. That one is not playing. I don't know why. Hey, there you go. Of him sliding. Doesn't look much, though, of course. Obviously, on the game, everything when you film something, it never looks as spectacular as it does with the final shot, of course. It's always like that. But yeah.
Cool. Right. I'm going to talk a little about the actual creation of the asset. As you know, this is a game trailer. So when we started the game, the productions, there are some of the assets, props, has already made by the game divisions. And these are some of the examples that you saw that are the asset that are directly from the game division. One thing worth mentioning that Rebellion have its own photogrammetry team that they actually went to France to capture some of the real locations and then process it into 3D assets later, which the entire game is pretty much done in photogrammetry, which was really helpful for us because we can take the assets and then process them for the trailer purposes as well. Most of the assets you saw in the trailer and directly from the game, they used in the midground or background, and foreground assets are actually had a lot of retouch, DMP touch-up, or bespoke asset we made. Another example here, some of you studying the games stuff might be familiar with this method, which is called the kit bash method. So all the terrains are made in individual pieces. That's like a really, really typical Unreal workflow. You bash them together into shapes of rocks and terrains, a cliff, which is you saw on the right-hand side, which is actually with a kit bashed with a lot of different rock pieces that you saw. Again, all of those are scanned assets. We didn't use quick source make scans anything because you know the only possibility for Unreal, which you have licensing usually if you're trying to use them elsewhere. Okay, so we actually developed our process to convert the game asset into a VFX standard asset. This is the example of a game asset that directly comes from the game engine. So the UV looks like, you know, completely gabati of like things that get on top of each other, very, very optimized for the game purposes. But when we are doing VFX, this is not probably the best way we want to go for, which we develop a procedural tool that transforming from this to this. So this, on the left-hand side, what you saw here is a standard VFX workflow called UDM workflow. which then you basically lay the UVs into individual UV tiles. And we also developed a tool that allowed us to group the materials into large categories. So in here, you saw the roof tiles, stone wall, and the concrete being grouped into there, which will be then using our material library automatically assigns the material which has already got the correct parameters and things like that on top of it. Some of the example that you saw here, which is directly converted from a game in Houdini, and that's the automatic render that comes out from the farm. It can be used as a single little asset, like those barrels, but also can convert large asset like the castle, cathedrals, or even the whole environment set. Right, vegetations. Vegetations are one of the things that we had to do quite a lot of work. The reason for that is because the game vegetations are highly optimized. They use like multiple cars, which is not really the true geometry. They are very, very much about texture-based. You know, they don't really have topologies and it's just a single card with textures on top. Obviously, for the quality that we're trying to achieve, and that was not good enough. So we have to build the trees, grass, vines inside the speed tree. So the asset was produced inside speed tree. And again, our USD pipeline allowed us to be able to generate the different level of detail. So what is level of detail? Level of detail is basically when your camera is moving far away from the object, is using less polygon, right? And the closer it gets using higher resolution, which is really optimized for rendering purposes. And this is quite crucial for the game development as well as the rendering, offline rendering. Another example here you saw with 3 different LODs. Again, our tool just to give you this pretty much automatically with very minimum tweaking. Some more example that you see directly comes from the farm. Wine system. The other thing worth mentioning is because we also simulate the plant movement. There's a vein simulations in this trailer, which is really subtle, but is actually really important to bring that actual realism into the shot. So by having bespoke asset made directly through speed tree, that allows us to have that vertex movement, that extra detail that we need. So environment, you saw here, which we collected a large amount of the reference. The Sniper Elite franchise is famous for its accuracy and historical reference. So in the reference sheet that you saw here, we actually used a real location, which is, I don't know why Zoom is not working, by the way. Your Zoom is not working. No, I mean, oh, is it? Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, so we use, we actually went to France, and this is the actual real location, that photogrammetry team that took some photos. And then we also, because we're working for a game trailer, right, we have to be very, very truthful for the actual game. So our artist actually had a copy of the game already, and we fly around to see what the actual game looked like. So we basically gathered the real reference, but also the game reference. And then at the same time, we need to be historical accurate, which then we look at the historical reference as well, and especially the lightings and things like that, you know, very, very important to have that. And then our amazing concept artists produced a concept based on all of this together. And then this is the direct screenshot from the actual game. We took a snapshot of the games when we started to producing it. But again, this was not final because we had to start the trailer as well as the games halfway through in their stage. So we kind of have to do it in parallel with them rather than game is finished and then do the trailer, okay? So we took that asset, used the process that you saw earlier, converted the game asset level into our USD pipeline. And here, obviously, you can see that some of the detail got lost. Not everything can be transferable because the game technique still have, you know, the vertex paint and things like that. That's normally not transferable directly. And especially at Rebellion, they use their own game engine, which is not Unreal, which is Azure game engine, which is bespokely developed by the game division. So not everything can be transferred. But this gives you a really good ballpark starting point that for the artist to work on top of it. Some of the process that we took, which is also including incredibly powerful procedural process by Houdini. So after the conversion of the asset, we put the procedural in the background, obviously, you see here. But the foreground, all this terrain, the game did not have it. So we had to do those ourselves, and this was done procedurally through Houdini high field system. Again, a procedurally vegetation generation system on top of the high field, which just scattering the vegetation stuff that you saw earlier across the landscape. When you're scattering stuff, it's not just about, you press button and everything just like, okay, done, go home. No, you got to think about how the stuff is growing in hierarchy level. So for example, if you have a tree, you have a tree, then you have a tree, and then you have bushes around the tree, then you have the pebble around the bushes, you have the micro scatters on the rocks and things like that. So you have twigs, there's a tiny little detail here you can see, there's little twigs and rocks. Have a lot of reference. To look at the reference is always the key crucial point to the realism. Then the look dev department, so that was modeling department. Then look dev department takes the set, and then they're doing a look dev passes on top of it. They normally would look dev things in different lighting conditions, even though we know this environment is only going to be used for early morning, because we want to make sure the material is actually behaving correctly under all lighting condition. And that's very, very important. So as you can see here, we actually looked at it under three different lighting conditions, if you like. And then lighting department go in, generate the last, the touches before the actual mood, the actual atmosphere, before they go on to the render farm for the final render. And all the volumetric lighting you see there is actually coming from the CG. It was not done by comp. It was purely done by lighting department. Comp obviously had a touch up at the end. And then DMP by comp. DMP stands for digital matte painting, obviously, and is to do the last 20% detail pass, if you like. So if you look on the right-hand side of the cliff here, and then that's the DMP touch-up, which I keep pressing the wrong button. Yeah, so this is lighting, obviously, and you can see the cliff. And then the DMP, you can see there's the actual details on top of it. Has been reprojected back on in the comp. Character, very, very important for the game. The character, the biggest challenge when we started to do this whole thing is we actually don't have a character, final design of it, believe it or not. We actually, yeah.
And that was one of the biggest challenge, because the problem, of course, is the game is not out yet, and the game won't be out until the end of this year, or maybe later on in this year. So at some stage, we had an idea, of course, of how Carl would look like, because of course there's been another four games before this one, but it was incredibly important to work very closely with the games department for them to give us whatever they had by then. But then, of course, Sun's team had to push it over to make it more photoreal, because obviously a game asset will not really work very well on a close-up on some of these shots, especially on the shot when he's walking through the corridor, through the tunnel. It's really incredibly difficult to use just a game asset on a shot like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are the brief sheet come from the game division, and that's how they want to look. And they give us some example of this is Sniper Elite 4, and they want a bit higher fidelity. That's the example they give to us. And then again is they used real photogrammetry again, they had actors and scan him, and this is the raw scan that comes out and had a little process on it. But this was not final. This was just a whip that they give to us, and they wanted something better than that. We had to analyze the topology because, like Hugo said, when he walked through the corridor and the attention is on his eye, So we really need to kind of analyze what the best way to do this and to give that real emotion moment for Carl when we first revealed him. Right here.
And let's not forget that this trailer was delivered in this was a 4K trailer. So obviously you didn't saw it in 4K just before. You saw it in HD because that's what we're projecting here. But in 4K, it's 4 times the pain. So everything is 4 times worse and 4 times more complicated and 4 times more detailed. So obviously that's even worse for an asset that could come directly from a game because it won't hold up on that kind of resolution.
Yeah. So in the games, apart from Carl, and you also have other officers, like different characters in the environment as well. In Rebellion, we develop our own facial archetype, if you like, which means all character can be mapped onto the same topology. So you just put the scan asset, and then you can remap this topology onto the scan asset. So what this allowed you can see in here, you can just see the face get shifted into different type of face, but the topology are exactly the same, which then you can apply the blend shape, the face, for the really, really detailed facial expressions. Example of how the final model looks like before it goes to the look dev department. Then we obviously had the groom. Again, groom was done through Houdini guided groom in Houdini 18.5. That was a new feature that we had to look into. In the games, the hair was just done by card with the textures, right? Which obviously doesn't really work for the VFX standard that we're trying to achieve. We had to use the groom, which is, to actually generate these hairs quite seriously. The final example you hear, the groom system was not only used for the hair, but also used on the sweater. As you can see, those little tiny details, and it's really difficult to see in the trailer, but if you really look carefully, but that's what gives you the actual realism that you're looking for all the time. So spend a huge amount of effort really trying to get him look as realistic as possible. Some of the example here, even the trouser stuff. And again, this is scanned with actual uniform, but we obviously had to make sure the PBR materials and stuff like that works for our pipeline. Again, this is how he finally looks like in the actual shot, with all the effort that you saw earlier put in. Look at these details.
And this is the final frame, including compositing and grading and everything. Obviously, we're going to talk about that stage at the very end of the presentation, but that's with everything. This is the final frame. And obviously, if you watched, you probably could take the opportunity, if you watch the trailer on YouTube, it is in 4K. You can actually watch a lot more of these little details that Sun is talking about here, because you can actually see the little fuzziness of the sweatshirt and the hair and everything.
Yeah. So next department is FX. As you saw in the early concept, and this huge amount of atmospheres, fogs and mist in the early morning, and we're really trying to capture that at the moment, which we then developed a library of FX, which the fully volumetric, because it's done in 3D, which then we drop into the environment for the rendering, but also we render those individually, which then can be used in the compositing stage as well. So it's kind of a mix of both 3D as well as 2D solution. Some of the shots that you saw where the truck going through the truck going through the bridge, it was done bespokely for the shot because we had to do the simulation just for the shot only with the turbulence, and really want to capture that when the truck going through the mist and it generate that amount of turbulence in the air, the motion, that thing. Right. So when we're doing FX, especially for large effects, which at the opening shot you saw the cloud, the oceans. So for the cloud, we normally start with like a proxy, which you saw here. Just some metaballs. Like this is just the layout path. to show this to a director or to a VFX supervisor, make sure he's happy with how the things are laid out before you generate the VDB, because this stuff takes hours to render. And as they go on farm and takes really, really long time to render, you want to get the layout locked as much as possible before you go on to the render farm. So then we generate that, and then we generate the VDB volume, which is the volumes on top of that, using those metable as an emitter. And we generate that. And then we're going through the lighting, which then we break down into different lighting setup. Because in the scene, there's multiple different lights. There's moonlight, there's bounce light, there's things like that. We had to generate them into like 3 different light groups. So therefore, they can pass into the comp department for compositing as well. Ocean simulation is always very, very difficult for any CG work because the time consuming and the amount of data is generated is going to be huge. For this, we had multiple containers in Houdini then we stitch them together. So individual of this tile, you saw this one, this is a single tile of that. This is same as this. We generated multiple tiles, then just stitched them together for the final. And then at the end, when we showed it to Hugo, and Hugo was like, "Oh, can I have some splashes there at the tip of it?" Then we generated a bespoke hero splashes just for that, which is then composited later in the shot. Lighting department, which is the last department before we go to compositing. In this trailer, we grouped everything into 2 light groups. When you are doing a lighting, you wanted to group lighting as much as possible because then you can have a multiple shots sharing the same lighting. So in this trailer, we have 2 master lighting. One is early before the sunrise, and then is the direct morning sunlight, which is the golden hour. And then we have these 2 master lighting set up, and then they being used into the multiple sequences later. Obviously, you already saw this, which is, again, the reference board. Some of the AOVs passes. So we don't really normally generate one single beauty pass into the comp. We generate render with AOVs. This allows the compositing department to tweak the individual channels and to gather extra push. It's a typical example of some of the AOV stuff we done. Again, this is some QC render that comes through the farm, which quality checks the stuff quite regularly. Every evening we have a QC render. This is the example of a few of them. All right. I think this is my last part, which is the which I'm going to talk a little bit about USD, because this is really big topic and is quite trendy right now. Obviously, in the industry, everyone is looking into using USD pipeline into their studios, and we are very proud about we actually one of the early adapter for this entire pipeline. So what is the USD pipeline? USD stands for Universal Scene Description, which developed by Pixar and many years ago. But unfortunately, and Side Effects has done some amazing work to make that pipeline available for Houdini 19. Make sure you check that out. So what is the advantage of USD pipeline in comparison to the traditional pipeline? USD pipeline works as a layer system. So you imagine you basically layering the stuff on top of each other. Each department is one of the container that contains all the information, and then pass to the next, and the data get overloaded on top. The advantage of that, you can disable of any of the layer in the chain, and the data will keep flowing into the lighting for the render, so it's non-destructive in a way. So there is an example of, we have one layer called the animation layer, and then you have the groom layer, which is loaded on top of the anim, then the environment layer, and then FX layer. So here is the example that you can see if you keep your eye on the tile, which is the when car was sliding down the roof, is actually created some turbulence for the tile. So you can see that when you overlay the FX department layer, it transforms some of the tile. So the FX department is only using a transformation data, if you like, overlay. The geometry data is coming from the layout department, and that's the advantage of it. So there's very little footprint there for the data from the FX. When we assemble the scene, and here is the usual scene graph that you saw, which has all the department layer assembled before it goes to lighting. This is we call it a scene assembly. Again, I'm not going to go too much detail here, but usually the lighting department, which will pull their hair out, trying to, oh my God, so many layers, what am I going to do? And they normally break them down into individual layers based on the department discipline. So you have an environment volume, which is the FX, and then you have animation, and then you have FX, which then you can control them individually later. Right, here is our own system that the tree you saw earlier. I was talking about the LOD, and this is the example of how the LOD is working in our USD pipeline. So when you was really close to the tree, you're using the highest amount of detail on the model. When you zoom out, which is the camera away from it, and it will change to the green, which is the lesser detail really. This is just a demonstration of that. And on the right-hand side, you will see this camera distance changing. And up on top of that, we also have another optimization system, which is called camera frustum-based colon. So when the object is moving outside the camera frustum, and it will basically switch into a lower level of detail. Why do we need to do that? Because, again, for speed up the rendering, this is actually came from a game technology, right? Things like Unreal Engine, they use that sort of stuff quite a lot. But we borrowed that principle and implemented it into the USD pipeline. So why don't we just delay them? We could just delay them when they're outside the camera. The reason we don't delay them is because they can contribute into the lighting. So first, you can have a bounce light, but also they can cast a shadow into the environment as well. So that's why we don't delay them. And this is the example of two systems working in conjunction. So you have the camera-based, but also you have a camera frustum-based. You can see we display them into two different colors to show you how this system working. All right, I'm going to pass to Hugo to talk about the lenses.
Yeah, so now we're going to talk about the finishing this trailer, really. We're going to talk about lenses, compositing, and finishing and grading as well. And the reason I wanted to really focus on this part is because we took a very different approach this time. We actually tried to introduce as much realism as we could from a lens point of view in the compositing stage and also on the grading stage. This means actually using real lens data to try to get that extra level of realism into the shots. What do I mean about that? So first of all, me being, you saw on the slides, I'm always on set and I'm always filming and I'm always supervising on set. So I'm always very inclined to film as much as I can. And I really advise you all to always do that, to always use cameras, to always go out. And I'm not talking about an iPhone, okay? I'm talking about a real camera, like an actual camera, like a reflex camera or a mirrorless camera, doesn't matter. But go out and take photos so that you can discover all the little minute details of what an image is like. In this situation, what we did was I went over to a set and took these grids, and then I established that what lenses that I wanted to use on the trailer. I knew that I wanted to use the 35 millimeter, I wanted to use the 50 millimeter, want to use the 105 millimeter. And so what I did was I picked up this grid, which we normally use to capture for sets to undistort the plates. So there's a process in visual effects where usually you film these grids and then you use these grids to try to undistort the plate so that you are able to track it in 3D, so that you can do some match moving. But on this situation, we did almost the reverse. What we did is we used this data to try to understand what was the bowing and also what was the lens distortion on each individual lens of this project, of each individual lens of the shots. Not only giving me the information of the lens, but also giving me the information of chromatic aberration, of light dispersion, of diffuseness that you have on the bright areas, on the blooms, the glooms, all of that. And so here's an example of how this looks. So if you look closely here, this is a frame coming from the farm at Rebellion. So this does not have compositing yet, does not have grade yet. This is just straight out of the render farm from Rebellion. And by adding that extra detail using lens distortion, chromatic aberration, and vignetting, and extreme vignetting, you reach this. So basically what you're now having is the real, this is not much, of course. This is like a little detail, but it just contributes to make the image just look a bit less CG. Because obviously, this is a beautiful image, but it still looks too CG. If I put this, and then of course on top of that, I put the grain, and I put the color correction, then it starts to transport the shot into a different realm that you can't really achieve normally just by rendering it on a CG application. Here's a close-up of what I'm talking about. So this is the corner of that scene. This is straight from CG, looks beautiful. The boys and girls of Rebellion did an amazing job. But then look at what happens if I start putting distortion and displacement of lenses, of real data of lenses, and then I start putting real grain on top and actual real displacement and bloom on top of the image. You basically go from this to this. And we ended up doing this on all the shots. And the cool thing about this is that not only it contributes for the shot to become more realistic, but it also helps you as an artist to understand better how lenses work. How does light get transferred through the lens? How does diffuse look like? How does grain look like? And that is why I'm always bothering my students saying, go and take photos, go and take photos. You want to know about light? Go and take photos. You want to know about composition? Go and take photos. Always go and take photos. The answer is always go and take photos. Whatever you're going to ask me, you're going to say, go and take photos. That's always going to be my answer. Here's another example of it. Shot of Carl, that shot with the tunnel, straight from CG, looks beautiful. And then the extra effort that we did with the compositing team and the grading team to try to add that extra lens distortion, the extra grain, the extra grittiness of it. Again, when you look at the close-up, it looks really beautiful. It already has the depth of field already. That's another conversation for another day. We're not going to be talking about depth of field today. And then you add the lens distortion, and then you add the grain. And the grain and the diffuseness just kind of melts and merges the CG and kind of removes some of the sharpness that you usually have in CG that sometimes can become a problem. And this process can be done on any render, really. It doesn't need to be from Maya or from Arnold or from V-Ray or can be for anything, even from Unreal. Even in Unreal, you also have these post-processing effects that you can add to it as well. But I'm going to shut up a bit now because I've been talking for too long. And let's start actually showing you some breakdowns, because I think breakdowns are always the easiest way to go through the shots and really understand how they were made. So I'm going to start by the first shot. This is the first stage, which is the matte painting stage. Then we went into, just like Sun explained to you, all the pipeline of the actual effects pipeline that we had here. And at some stage, then of course, we started gathering all these things together. The CG, the particles, the volumes, the light, the lens distortion, the grain, everything goes together to form that final image, which you will see in the breakdown in a few seconds. So layer by layer, light by light, light group by light group, AUV by AUV, and then you kind of start building your image until you have a final version. I'm not going to go through all of them here, but here's another example of how it looks, the compositing breakdown, and the CG breakdown of all the different lights, AOVs, everything that has been built from the entire team until now, being glued together, merged together, and massaged until you have a final image. And this, again, just like Sun was explaining, using and taking advantage of light groups, taking advantage of AOVs, and taking advantage of things that you don't really necessarily want to go back and re-render all the time. And so if you have to make a change, you can do some quick changes in comp. Obviously, I'm always a big advocate, if you have something really big to change, you should always go back to 3D to try to finish what you need to do. So here's another example, all the different AOVs that we had. And of course, besides the AOVs, we also had different layers that we can control through the project. Meaning a fog layer, we had like the foreground, the middle ground, certain parts of the grass, the background, the matte painting, the sky, everything kind of separated so that we can control the bloom, we could control the way light hits the surfaces of the camera, and of course control the lens distortion and all that kind of grittiness that the shot had, because the objective again was to make a trailer that was set on the Second World War. So it was always never going to be a clean trailer anyway. This is one of my favorite shots with the fog and the light coming through from the headlamps of the truck. They did a beautiful job here. And this is a combination of real effects and real volume lights together with certain lights that were done in comp as well, all kind of merged together to make a seamless integration with the fog. Again, the same goes for this shot as well. This is the concept art. This is the first pass animation before going to mocap. We then, of course, went to mocap and shot a base animation. That base animation then gets all tweaked and finalized. We then have a first version of rendering, and then, of course, we have a final version of rendering and animation. And then the compositing and also layering all the fog, all the elements, all the layers until we have a final image, layer by layer, including a final grade at the end as well, which massages all the shots together to make the final shot. Now, I'm going to skip a couple of ones. I wanted to show you this one, which I thought it was funny. I posted a breakdown to promote this talk and to promote the talk we did this week at Skip Studios. And I got this comment from the internet. We always love comments on the internet. So someone was asking, oh, I love these breakdowns. Did you calculate the magnification of the eye based on a real sniper rifle optics? The answer is no, we did not. So what happened actually on this shot was incredibly difficult to create, and we had a lot of iterations of this shot. This eye that we had inside here, for a long time, we could not get it to work fully as a full photoreal eye. So what we did was we merged and mixed photographs of an eye into the CG. Because why not? Again, we couldn't really reach that realism. We couldn't really reach everything we could. So then we merged CGI with photo eye, and this is actually the eye from the compositor. We actually photographed the compositor's eye and then merged it into the actual rifle because it worked. Anything that you can do to try to improve your shot, it doesn't really matter. There's another shot like this on the trailer, which is the finger on the trigger as well, when he's actually shooting the rifle, the last shot of the trailer. That finger as well is a real finger that we filmed and then merged. This is a very common thing that sometimes we do by the same way that Sun was explaining that we also did projections and actually paint overs on top of the CG. Very common process where you go and actually project more textures and project 3D projections on top of the geometry to try to add to the CG, to try to make the CG look even better than what it was already. So I just wanted to mention this because I want to make sure you have an open mind to try to find the solution for a problem. Because no matter how much we could continue tweaking that eye, we're going to spend too much time trying to make the eye. So might as well try to get into a different solution by a more creative solution in this case. And I think I'm going to I think this is the last breakdown we have, actually, which is one of my favorite shots. Again, like we've been discussing from the very beginning, always try your best to mimic the bloom and the gloom that the atmospherics exist in the real world. Again, taking photos and references to try to mimic as much as you can. And this is the last shot. One thing I wanted to mention about this shot is just a little small note about the mocap shoot. So a lot of people have a kind of like an idea that mocap is like a press of a button. You know, you go to a mocap studio and someone runs and you press the button and it's all done and it's finished and it's good and it's so easy. It's actually not that easy. And in fact, this shot was, although it looks simple, is incredibly difficult because Carl had to jump from one building to the other building. And then he had to like roll inside the building and then get up and have this glorious walk without even breaking a sweat. I mean, of course, no one really can do this for real. So what we ended up having to do is we had to shoot 3 different parts of the animation. We had to shoot one mocap footage of him jumping between buildings. Then we had to shoot another mocap of him rolling on the floor, and then another mocap of him walking beautifully in the tunnel. And of course, all of this had to be blended together in animation, which made it even more difficult. Not to mention that we had to do so many takes to do this. We ended up doing, this is just of one of the sequences. There's 3 sequences merging on this part. These are 12 takes just to get the jump. And again, just to convey this idea that nothing is easy. Nothing is easy. Everything takes time. Everything is complicated. And in fact, mocap has never been a full solution. You always have to put more animation on top. You always have to tweak and massage what you've done. And I think this is true for every stage of the production. Not just mocap, not just animation, not just lighting. The same way that you need to kind of carry on until you make something that looks good. But, you know, I'm going to wrap up now because we're going to go for questions. Otherwise, they're going to boot me up out of this. But before we wrap up, we're just going to do a bit of shameless promotion, just for a little bit. So make sure you follow Hugo's Desk. That's my YouTube channel if you want to check video tutorials, if you want to check some podcasts, if you want to check some video essays and some video reviews, just go to Hugo's Desk on YouTube. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Hugo C. Guerra. You can also follow Sun at eSunVFX. And, you know, you always will see the latest news both from Rebellion and from the projects that we are both working. Of course, goes without saying that follow Rebellion Studios as well. Their Twitter account is Rebellion Film TV. And one last thing that I would like to shoehorn here is that I have a podcast with Ian Fales from a magazine called Before and Afters. If you want to check it out, my podcast is called VFX Notes. And we have it on YouTube with a bunch of behind the scenes and breakdowns. And just recently we had Steph Soretti, which was the VFX supervisor of Eternals for Marvel. And we usually have a lot of guests on our show. We have 18 episodes so far. So go and check it out. And of course, you can watch it on YouTube, but you can also listen it on podcast, Apple Podcasts, or on Spotify as well. And that's it. You see, it always works. If you put someone clapping, they'll clap.
I wondered where that was coming from. I was like, who's that one person?
It
Still
always
clapping.
works because someone
good.
listens to the one clap.
They
and
do.
then,
Yeah.
oh,
Can we put this mic on?
Q&A, anyone?
Can we put a Q&A?
There you go.
I'll leave
Is
this
one?
lovely image on the
Hey.
background while
There
we're
I
doing the
am.
Q&A.
Okay, cool. Hands up. So there's a couple of hands over there and going. Go on, Kibi. You can kick us off.
Need to say for which one do you want to ask? For
Okay.
who?
Who are you asking for?
Hey, Sean, have you ever had trouble producing VFX for a challenging game that you were working on? I wonder.
Producing a VFX as, yeah. I think that the biggest challenge that we had was when I was working on Battles on VR. That was a VR game. And Battles on VR was one of the first 10 VR game launched for PlayStation. So when we were working on it, no one knows exactly the formula, how we're making it. One of the thing about VR is that everything has to be, you suddenly, when you are inside VR, you have a immersive, things are not on the single plane images anymore. It's not just on your monitor, it's actually, you are inside that 3D world yourself. So when we were making effects, everything has to look volumetric. So we actually developed a style that is a fully neutralizing the geometry style, stylized explosion, stylized fire, stylized smokes, and everything has that 3D depth to it. And that really sold the thing was made for VR. So I think that was the biggest challenge that I ever had, because it was a new thing, new territory that we have to make.
How Allsworth to hear?
How was it?
How awesome.
Can I answer real quick that question as well? Can I answer that question? Is that okay? Yeah. Can I also tell you? Yeah. So one of the biggest challenge I had in games development was the game not coming out. So that's one of the things that I wanted to make sure everyone here understands, that I've been involved on multiple trailers, multiple projects, multiple games that never came out. And that happens a lot. Like a lot. Like years ago, I was doing the cinematic trailer for Heat 3 for Mario vs. Rabbids, and we worked on it for like 6 months. We had like a team of 20 people animating and rendering and lighting and everything. That trailer never came out.
It does happen. Yeah.
It happens all the time.
It happens
Years ago, I was at the mill supervising a big cinematic, a 3-minute long cinematic for Rainbow Six Patriots, which you don't know which game it is because this game never came out. So we did that trailer for like 7 months. A team of 50 people working on that thing. Never came out, that trailer. So this is a very common thing that happens. So for me personally, that's my biggest challenge, is when not knowing if the thing is going to come out or not.
Yeah, some people work for game for years and the game got cancelled at the end, and it happens too. Yeah.
Hi. So my question is for Sun.
Yep.
I'm wondering whether opening a VFX department within Rebellion, was it more like business-driven decision, or does it have more to do with pipeline optimization and like sharing assets and tools between games and VFX?
It's a mixture of both, I would say. So first, obviously, is a business decision, and from the game division of the owner, which is Chris and Jason, which owns the Rebellion. And they bought the new facility in Didcot, which you saw earlier, that I showed you on the images, and is a huge facility, 12-acre land. Also, Rebellion owns a lot of IPs, as I mentioned. Some of them you probably already saw on Twitter, like Rogue Troopers being directed by Duncan Jones. So they had a vision of like, we want to be involved in the film production, and so how we do it. So they wanted to have fun of making stuff themselves as well. That's why they invested into the VFX team, a facility, so they could have that creative input to their own IP and own project. So in that way, it is a business decision, but also at the same time, as you saw, that we neutralizing some of the traditional VFX pipelines, like compositings, Nuke, Mayas, and stuff like that. But at the same time, we because we game engine driven company before, back in the day, that's why we into virtual production as well, using game tech. So we kind of, when I established the team, one of the biggest thing that in my head was like, how do I merge these two industries together? I'm not saying one technique is better than the other. I'm saying that they all are tools at the end of the day. It's how you neutralize them for the best result you can achieve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My question is for the both of you. Do you ever get the chance to play the games that you work on?
Yeah, can I start that? So yeah, I have now directed 15 trailers in my life, and yes, I always play the game much earlier than it actually comes out. It didn't happen on this game, because this game, we started this trailer very, very early on.
They don't have
the game didn't existed really yet, but most of the times we get the builds. Even when I was at the mill, we usually got the builds months and months before the game was out, usually a very alpha stage or a very beta stage. And the reason for that is it's very important for us to play the game so that we see the missions and we see what the game looks like. So that when we are developing the story or the script or even developing the look of the game, we want to make sure we are as faithful as possible. So it's very common practice. In fact, when I was working at Fire.Smoking at Sony, we actually had a dev kit at our office. A dev kit is, if you don't know what it is, it's basically a specific PlayStation just for development, which is given to you by Sony, and it's only supposed to be at your office. And basically, it's the only way for you to play in development builds. So they download it, and then it's locked on that machine, and then you can play that game, which is in development. There's usually a timer, and so after like a few weeks, the game gets deleted by itself. It auto-destructs almost. So it's like, that's very common practice in the industry.
Yeah, I'm going to give you my own personal view, right? This is only my personal view. When I was a game developer, I mean, I play that game every day. When it's launched, I don't want to see it. So I don't actually play when the game is actually launched because I played too much when I was working on it.
Hi, I'm Shanae. I wanted to ask, you know, with the trailers, so you'll get, wait, let me think about this. So with the client, you'll have a client will come to you with their idea or their concept, and then you do all the previews for it. So when it comes to the trailer and making it, do you have to stick to the specific thing they've told you to do, or do you kind of get freedom to do what you want?
I guess it depends on the trailers that I've done in the past. Like we had quite a lot of freedom on this trailer, although of course we had like specific things we had to hit, you know, like certain targets. Like we know we had to show Carl jumping, we had to show Carl climbing, we had to show Carl doing certain things and holding the gun in a certain way because it had to be faithful to the game. And also, for example, right at the beginning, I really wanted to do this trailer with a lot of rain. I wanted a lot of heavy rain, and I was told by the games team, no, we don't have rain on our game, so I couldn't put the rain, for example. So there's a lot of limitations you have to work with the game studio. Obviously, sometimes it's different. Like I've done cinematics and trailers that are so stylized that they don't have to respect anything because they're like just. Comes to mind, for example, a cinematic I directed for Just Cause 3 years ago. That one is completely stylized. It almost looks like a James Bond intro for the game. You know, it's like a very motion graphic driven piece. So it really depends on type of trailer. For this trailer, we had to follow a very specific brief. Yeah.
Yeah, it's game trailer and need to be truthful for the actual game. So, like Hugo was mentioning, we had to have some key feature that the marketing team wanted to be included. So we have to have those right, and that's the constraint you will probably have.
Yeah. But I must say, I haven't told them this yet, but I must say this, from all the trailers I've directed so far, this is probably the smoothest ride I had, like so far in my life.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah,
Rebellion was amazing on all the ideas we had. They were terrific on accepting anything. Of course, when like the rain thing, we knew we couldn't do it, you know, that's fine. But like it was really like a collaborative spirit, you know, they were helping and they were coming up with ideas as well. We had so many meetings, so many Zoom meetings. It was really nice. It was a really nice atmosphere. I've been on other game studios that it wasn't like that. You had like a very strict rule, it had to be like that on the highway. So it was like, it's a shame that sometimes that happens, but fortunately, it was a really, really nice collaborative effort from Rebellion, you know.
Hands up for any more?
My question is for Son. You mentioned working both between Unreal and Houdini. If you used it, did you find the utilization of Houdini engine a useful tool?
So which 3D end?
You mentioned using Unreal and Houdini. If you used it, did you find Unreal Engine a useful tool for working between the two?
Yeah, so we actually prefer this trailer. We actually had another trailer. I don't know if you saw, it's called Evil Genius Cinematic 2 trailer. That was actually a hybrid pipeline. Majority of the shot was rendered through this pipeline you saw, with one shot inside the casino when he walked through the casino. That shot was done in Unreal. So we sometimes make a decision, again, as I said earlier, it's not about one is better than the other, it's about what you use at what task you received. And Unreal has very different spectrums, you know. Some of them they're doing, you know, it's largely used for virtual production now, right? And there's no other tool you can use for virtual production, obviously.
I was going to put that image.
And so we use that quite a lot for our LED stages and stuff like that, because that's what industry standard is. So I always neutralize both, I would say. You know, I found is we start to use Unreal for pre-visualization as well now, which is like, you know, the previous for this one you saw is done in Maya, but now we're moving our pipeline for Unreal for previous, for a very simple reason, because it's real time. And now what we found is that a lot of clients want to see the stuff pretty as early as possible. That's when Unreal is really shine, because you can literally have lighting changes and set dressing changes within a matter of minutes. When it's come to finishing, we depend on the budget and the quality you're trying to hit. All our, like, you know, the fair index, which just came out December or January actually, that was still using Houdini rendering. We couldn't do it in Unreal. So again, it's tool, you got to choose the right tool, basically.
Yeah, and I would add to that Unreal, of course, is a shift. It's a shift on our industry, of course, and it's really important at this time, because it's really making the feedback process and also the look development process accelerate quite a lot. But at this stage right now, Unreal is still not on a level that you can deliver shots. The reason for that is really just pure resolution and detail that we need on shots. You know, if you look at a film, especially if it's a big budget movie like a Marvel movie, they're rendering 4, 6, 8K to deliver to IMAX, you know. So it's like, we're talking about resolutions or even pipelines that wouldn't even work in Unreal, and the renders wouldn't live up. Obviously, things are being experimented. For example, just recently on the latest Matrix movie, I don't know if you've seen the film, but the part of the dojo, when they're fighting on the dojo, like the dojo itself is a regular traditional visual effect pipeline, like the pipeline you just saw. But everything around the dojo on the background, all the trees, all the water, that's actually Unreal, which they've rendered in Unreal, and then they brought it into compositing with the AUVs that Unreal can produce, and then touched up that Unreal render in compositing to make it look even better than just the output of Unreal. So things are changing. Unreal is starting to become another render engine that we would use. And I think it's going to be like that for many years, because limitations here is that we are always living on a cycle, you know. When Unreal catches up and we can actually do 4K or 8K in Unreal, by that time, we're rendering 12 or 16K in CG, you know. So we're never really going to get there, because unfortunately, the demand for rendering just escalates so quickly. So I feel like personally, and from all the people that I've talked in the industry experts on this, we're going to be living on a hybrid system, just like the Matrix shot, where maybe you'll have foreground done on visual effects traditional pipeline, background done in Unreal, and maybe some parts in the middle ground in Unreal. And that is a perfect normal mix. You know, you might have a part in Houdini, a part in Unreal, a part in V-Ray, a part in Arnold. It doesn't really matter. They're just another layer, another tool, just like San was saying.
Thank you. There was another hand down here. Who was that? Was it Nick? Was it you, Nick? Yeah.
Hi. You did kind of just answer the question I was going to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I actually listened to your podcast you did about the new node in Nuke Unreal Reader. I was wondering if you had any more experience with that, or if you could share any more based on that.
Yeah, there's a new version now. So just yesterday, Nuke 13.1 V, whatever the hell it is now, came out, and it has a new version of that. It's still improving. One of the biggest challenges that plugin has is speed, which is a bit silly, right? If you think about it. Unreal is real time, but then when you go into Nuke, it goes into a crawling halt, because it has to go through the scanline render of Nuke's viewer. And I think that is the bottleneck here, is Nuke itself is the bottleneck, because Unreal is just too fast for Nuke. So although you can process the frames into the viewer, Nuke is not fast enough to actually output them. So I hope no one from the foundry is listening to this, but I feel like this is a dead end, what they're trying to do. You know why? Because they're trying to get the renders from, think about this, they're trying to like get the live renders that are in real time rendered in non-real time inside the comp. Okay, so we were in real time and now we're not in real time anymore, so what's the point? So it's a bit like, if I really, and then, you know, the conversation is, oh, but now we have AUVs and now we have masks and we have object IDs, we have cryptomats. But if I want to change something, I'll just go to Unreal and change it because it's in real time, remember?
Yeah,
so it's a bit like, okay, I'm going to go and change this cryptomat, but I could just go to Unreal and just do it there. It's a bit counterintuitive. I feel like, for me, the plugin strength is actually not the rendering. I think it's the camera work, because you can import and export cameras between Nuke and Unreal. This is really amazing, because think about it. You can track your scene in 2D, and then get your camera into Unreal, use the Unreal for a really complicated matte painting projection system, and then bring it back into Nuke as a layer to render. That's what I love about it, like the camera work, that you can actually not only import and export cameras, but you also can import and export environmental panoramas as well between the two applications. So I'm more excited about that than the AUV and the other stuff, because that's just too slow for me.
Yeah, I mean, I talk to Epic quite a lot, so I know the trying to keep the compositing side inside Unreal. That's their final goal, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Eventually, like, and this is a good advice for everyone here. I mean, goes without saying that Nuke is not going to go anywhere, because I see a lot of people online, oh, Nuke is dead now, no one needs compositing. No, that's not going to happen. Compositing is going to continue like it did since the 60s. We had compositing and optical already. What's going to happen is that Unreal is going to replace certain parts. If you have a CG scene in Unreal, that means if you're doing a full CG scene, then most likely you're going to do the post-processing that you would do in Nuke, like lens distortion, like stuff I was showing, lens distortion, blooms, glooms, displacements, all those things. You can probably eventually at some point do it in Unreal when they build these tools, which they are working on them. So that will step away from compositing pipelines. But compositing will still be very necessary for you to merge with live action, because you'll need to shoot plates, green screens, other plates, footage, live action of people running. Like, you'll need to integrate the live action element into Unreal. So compositing is not going to go anywhere. It's just that certain parts and aspects of compositing will go into Unreal. And this is why it's very important for all of you in this room. And this is a big, big topic for everyone. You need to be as agnostic as possible. Don't think about it as Nuke or Unreal or Maya or whatever it is at the time, Fandango 2000. It doesn't matter which application it is. What matters here is you need to learn lighting. You need to learn sculpting. You need to learn composition. Those are the things you need to learn, because those are the things that are, you know, I have changed compositing application and softwares 6 times. So I can't depend on knowing After Effects really well, or Shake really well, or Nuke really well, or Fusion really well, because I keep changing software as the industry travels between softwares. But what will always go with me and what would always carry with me would be my knowledge in color, knowledge in composition, knowledge in photography, which I've learned on my time that I had an art degree at that time. So you need to focus your attention on core skills so that it doesn't matter which software you're using. Because then learning the buttons, that's easy. What's difficult is to learn how to light a scene or how to actually properly make a scene look real. That's the difficult part. And that can only be learned by taking photos, learning of amazing work that cinematographers do in films, reading books about cinematographers, listening to podcasts about cinematographers. The key thing here is cinematography.
Great, thank you. Any more questions?
My question is for both of you, and on the back of what you said about Unreal developing tools for compositing and some of the memes you had at the start about Blender, what do you think?
Blender. Oh my God! Someone talked about Blender. I was expecting this. Like, when is Blender gonna come up?
Mostly my questions: what do you think the sustainability for the software in industry will be when everyone's trying to get everyone in their ecosystem and going for free software, and studios sort of are slowly adopting it to save on the colossal cost of like licensing?
Are they really? Think about it. Are studios using free software? Like, are they really shifting?
We had a talk this week, and an entire department for Ubisoft are all using Blender.
But that's not the whole industry. That's one company in France. So, I mean, let's not take, like, let's, I know this is a lovely topic to discuss in YouTube and on Twitter and on Instagram, and people are always talking about these things. The fact of the matter is that companies usually do not want free software. The reason for that is because they need support. They need full support and a full breakdown of what the software is going to do in the future. We usually, you know, when I was running the department at the mill, we had meetings with the managing directors of Autodesk, of Foundry, of all the softwares to know what they were going to do in 5 years from now. You know, we need to have a roadmap. We can't be depending on a software that might not be here next year, or it might go away. The industry has been burned quite a lot of times with softwares like that. The biggest example of that is what happened with Shake. It was bought by Apple and then it disappeared. And same thing happened with, you know, with XSI as well. It kind of just got vanished by Autodesk. We need certainty because usually the purchase rhythm is usually 7 years or 8 years or sometimes even 10 years. So I don't really see, and if you talk with the biggest visual effects companies in the world, none of them are shifting to a freeware model. They're just going to adopt the software as well, obviously. You know, the mill had Blender as well. We had Blender at Sony. Everyone has Blender because it's easy to have. It doesn't mean that it will replace it. It will mean that it will just be another application that will be on the tool set. So I'm just like, I want to make sure everyone just understands that, because it's not like just because it's free that it will end up being used. It might not end up like that, you know. Do you have anything to add about that?
I mean, yeah, the Ubisoft, I can understand why they're using it. The game division of Rebellion are using Blender too. But we are in the hybrid. The reason I'm saying that is the VFX industry is slightly different because the pipeline is much more, well, not much more developed is the wrong word, but like their model is they're quite linear. They've been like that for years. You know, it's very hard to change something halfway through in the production because they're constantly in productions. Where, you know, it's just like you can't risk it. Like, you know, change it, things gonna fall apart. They can't afford it, you know, the risk of it. Where Ubisoft and Rebellion game side, because the game development cycles are quite long, you know, the years of development cycle, but also at the same time, Blender is a tool to model. It's the same as a Maya to model or ZBrush or whatever, you know, you're using. The final assembly, the actual creation of the game is inside the game engine. It's nothing to do with Blender. And that's why they can adapt to it quite easily, because it's an input. You know, it's the input here you can replace. As long as you output as FBX file, whatever that comes out, it doesn't matter for them. It's the same as Rebellion. You know, we export as FBX, goes into the game engine, that's it. Game engine don't care where you created this, right? Because you can create it anywhere. As long as I'm receiving an FBX file, I'm happy. And that whoever use Blender, whoever use Maya, right? That's, like you said, is a cost thing, but as artists, as freelancers, like, we don't care what they use at the end of the day. Because as long as we get the quality we wanted. In VFX division, we have artists from Blender as well. We use Blender, but that's their preferred packages. Doesn't mean we're gonna be forcing them to use it, because again, we use Houdini as our primary. That's everything, like, again, ingested it from Blender, from Maya, from Studio SMAC, whatever. Ingested it as a USD asset. You know, where that comes from doesn't matter.
And it's really important for you to understand that most companies adapt quite quickly to their artists as well. You know, a lot of times an artist might be using a software and they come into the company to be hired to another software and they just move their knowledge to that software. Give an example, like some people might be very efficient on 3D Studio Max modeling. If they go into a company where they're going to be hired as a Maya modeler, I can bet if they are a good modeler, if they're really good at modeling, the company will not mind for them to take some time to transition their knowledge into Maya. That happens all the time. We've had artists all the time on all the companies that I've worked, coming all over the place. You know, people coming from Photoshop, from After Effects, from Fusion, and then moving into Nuke or moving into Shake or moving to whatever inside the company. There's always a lot of learning curves inside. There's always a lot of academies in the companies. There's like learning, there's tutorials, there's like teaching, there's some companies even having training sections of the company to train artists. So it's not about like, don't be too focused about the Blender thing. Be focused about modeling. Be good at modeling and don't really care that much if you're doing it in Blender or in Maya or 3D Studio Max. Be very good at how you break up your model. What is your workflow of building that model? How do you do the topology? How do you work through the model, you know?
Adaptability, I think, is the key. When you go into studio, there's loads of like bespoke tool. Like, you know, Rebellion's like using their own engine, like you never seen. You never worked with it. But there are artists working for us, right? So how do they learn? They just have to learn it fast.
One more. Yeah.
Does the workflow of a DMP artist differ when working on game cinematics compared to films or TV series? And what's the back and forth like with lighting change in Unreal and then having to go back to DMP?
Well, on the case of a trailer like this, or even like matte painting, the matte painting department is changing a bit. You know, years ago it used to be just literally a Photoshop artist doing matte paintings and then someone else would pick up the matte painting. These days it's a lot more complicated than that. Now these days we are going into the 3D package, doing full projection setups, either being done inside of Nuke if it's a simple projection. If it's a projection that requires reflections and refractions or some kind of self-illuminations or materials, then it has to be done projection setup inside the 3D package. It could be done in Maya, it could be done anywhere else. So the pipeline itself has changed, and most matte painters these days learn 3D and they know 3D so that they can at least set up their scenes, or they know Nuke so that they can deliver the matte painting setups into compositing so that the compositors can finish it. Yeah, so that's the process on a visual effects pipeline. In terms of an Unreal pipeline for matte painting, I don't know, like, do you have anything to say about that?
No, we don't really do DMP for Unreal stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's slightly different, yeah. But like, yeah, I was, when I was on Maleficent, there's two different type of DMPs. We call it 3D DMP. So which means that you basically, you're not painting on the beauty path. You're painting on a diffuse path. You're painting on a specular path. You're painting a mask. Could be a RGB channeled mask, where in Katana, which is MPC what they use, which is same as we use Houdini, obviously, you reproject that mask onto the rocks, for example, where the look dev artists use that mask, can darken part of the rock or brighten part of the rocks. And so to give that like the final touch up for the asset that comes from the asset department to break that procedural look, that's used really quite a lot, like just for that part of the pipeline. I think the entire, I don't know if you've seen the sequence that I supervised on Maleficent 2 is that, I don't know if you've seen the movie, but it's the opening shot, the 3 minutes, 5 minutes long opening shot, all in one shot. That was done, a lot of them are procedurally projection. That was pretty much everything was procedurally, landscape, scatterings, the castles, and you saw that it was purely projected like through this method I'm talking about.
We have a shot on this trailer like that as well.
Yeah.
The first one.
The first one is very similar, but obviously it's not moving that much, but it's very similar. Actually, that castle, that's the shot I was talking about when we were working together. But that shot is a good example.
It's this, you're talking about... Wait,
but
this shot here. No, sorry. Sorry, it's the shot between this one and the other one. I don't have the shot here.
The other way to do it is we call it slapcom. So which is you painting on the beauty path that comes out from the lighting department. You paint directly on that. You blend a photo on top, and then like Hugo was saying, you set up projection in Nuke, and you pass that Nuke script into the comp department, and then they take that and put in the comp. So that's second usage. So basically the DMP is basically this two type of usage, just to answer your questions here.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks. We've run out of time, guys, because there's an event coming at 4. So, I just want to thank you both for coming so much. It's been incredible to have you with us today. And let's say thank you from all of you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. You can go now, guys. Thanks for an awesome week. We'll see you next week.